Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good afternoon and welcome back to those of you who have been with me before, and a warm welcome to those of you who this is your first time. I'm Margaret Krivchenia, and I'm absolutely delighted to be on the Festival of Storytellers. I'm so delighted that they have invited me. It's been a wonderful experience. I am the author of my first adult novel, Evermore, and also the Four Cousins Mystery Series. This is book one, and this is The Ghost of Canyon Camp, and we're going to be talking about that today. Now, the first few days of this week, I talked about Evermore extensively, and I'm going to now go through some of the Four Cousins Mystery Series. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and bear with me, those of you who have been with me before. I grew up in Michigan, and I graduated from Wayne State University, and then graduated. I was going to be a voice major at University of Michigan, and actually ended up with a degree in counseling. So when I moved down here to Florida, and all of my family's here, my 4 grandchildren, my husband, my mom and dad were here before they passed away. So Florida's been our home now for several years, many years actually. And we live in the Tampa Bay area. I live in a town called Palm Harbor, which is just north of Clearwater, right on the Gulf. So beautiful area. It's in the 80s right now today. So we're waiting for, the cold weather to come, which will certainly be here in a few weeks. So I wanted to let you know about being an author, which is such a passion and love of my life right now. As I said, I was a counselor for 24 years at the high school and never thought that I'd end up being an author. And I loved working with children always. And when I had my grandchildren and they began, getting to the age of 2 and 3 years old, and I could tell them stories, and we'd have bath time, and I'd put them to bed, and they'd say, "Oh, tell me a story," and I'd bring out a book to read, and they'd say, "Oh, make one up." So I started making up stories. And as I said, that I've told you before, I use those silly little rubber animals that you have in the bathtub, whether it be otters or ducks or whatever. And I would make up stories about it. The first was the magical forest with all the talking animals in it. And every night or any time the grandchildren stayed over, I'd have a new little story to tell. And I found that, my imagination is working pretty good. So I would tell these stories, and a friend of mine said, "Why don't you write these down so they have them?" So I did start putting them into the first book I ever did was a big scrapbook, and I illustrated it and I gave it to them for their birthdays or for the holidays for Christmas. So they would have this always to keep. So as they became older, I have two grandsons and two granddaughters. I'd always loved the Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys series when I was growing up. Oh my gosh, I loved it. I read every one of Nancy Drew. I love detective and mysteries. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to build a series around my four grandchildren. They are going to be the main characters in the stories. So I started the Four Cousins Mystery Series, and I've been publishing those for about 6 years. And I have, really, they've had more adventures in these stories, and my grandchildren absolutely love it. And so I'm going to tell you today about the Ghost of Canyon Camp, which takes place in Yellowstone. And then on Monday for Halloween, I thought we'd do the Haunted Lighthouse, which is all about Sanibel Island, which is precious to me. And as you know, it was destroyed, very damaged in Hurricane Ian. So I'm going to tell you the story of our recollections because we do go there every April and we have a condo that we stay in. So it's right near the lighthouse. So I'll tell you about that on Monday. Next week, I'm also going to be talking to you about the secret of the Broken Arrow Mine, where we go back out west. We go to Wyoming and Montana, and you'll see the adventure that the four cousins have being trapped in a mine. And then the final book I'm going to tell you about is going to be The Case of the Mysterious Mansion, which takes place in Asheville, North Carolina. And it's a Christmas mystery. And it came out last year. My husband and I love to travel, and one of our favorite places is going to either Hendersonville or Asheville, North Carolina, near the Biltmore. So this takes place near the Biltmore. And again, the children, all the four cousins in every single book, they pray before meals, they have great faith in God, and they always save someone at the end. They turn someone's life around in every single book through their kindness, their caring, their reaching out to others. So I always try and have a message of helping others and of showing the goodness that is in each one of us. So that is the heart of my Four Cousins Mysteries. Now, I will be telling you a little bit more in the coming days about Evermore. This is my adult novel that was just published in July, and it's the love of my life because it talks about my family. And it's always been on my heart to talk about, tell the story of my mom and dad, how they met, my mother's lost love, of my grandparents and growing up. This takes place in upstate New York. My parents came from Auburn, New York, which is on Owasco Lake in the Finger Lakes region. And as a child, I got to visit that every single summer. I grew up in Detroit, but we would always travel back to see our relatives in Auburn, New York. And so I knew a lot about the Finger Lakes region, and I absolutely love it. So this is a historical romance. It starts in the 1930s, goes all the way into the new millennium. The characters in it are real. Some of the events may be fictional because I can't know everything, but I did know the stories my mom told me and my grandmother told me because my grandparents lived with us. So this is a beautiful story, and I'll be talking about that more in the days ahead. But for today, I want to concentrate on the Four Cousins Mystery Series. I am going to ask some of you questions. You've been asking me questions, and I want to ask some of you. So I would like to know from you, what is your favorite book that you remembered when you were growing up? Hopefully you did read some books growing up, but as a child or as a teenager, what were some of your favorite books? And do you remember some of your favorite characters in those books? And what kind of books did you like? Did you like mysteries? Did you like detectives stories? Did you like stories that were more real, that were adventure, biographies? So I'd like to hear from some of you, and any of you who want to let me know, just, answer these questions and let me know about it. The other thing I want to ask you is, since The Ghost of Canyon Camp takes place in Yellowstone, I'd like to know, have you ever been to Yellowstone? Have you ever been out west and seen the beauty of that area? It really is probably the most fantastic place I've ever seen. There's nowhere like it anywhere, with the geysers and those beautiful blue and green pools. And it's just, it's phenomenal. And so this is the setting for the Four Cousins mystery series, and it is the very book one of that. Behind me, if you look, you're going to see it's the bottom of the poster of the Four Cousins mystery series. And this is the book, and these are the four cousins and the dog Penny, and they're going to be on this in this story. Now, if you're going to get these for your grandchildren or children, you can get them from my website. You, of course, can buy them through Amazon or Barnes Noble, but if you get them from website, shipping's free, and I'll sign these for you, and I'll get some of the four cousins to sign them also. So it'll really be a treasure for you to keep. Now, as far as the Ghost of Canyon Camp is concerned, someone said to me, "Oh, is it a real ghost?" And I said, "No, it's not a Halloween ghost." The Ghost of Canyon Camp is a young man who has lost his way. His parents were killed in a car crash. He comes from Bozeman, Montana. He ended up living with his grandparents. They became too old to take care of him, and he ended up in foster homes. And finally, at the age of 15, he runs away and he hides out in Yellowstone. And that's where the story takes up. So the four cousins meet him and they end up turning his life around. But in the meantime, there's lots of thrilling, exciting, and harrowing adventures in this of what they go through. And yesterday, I did read the back cover and I talked about Yellowstone as being a place of wonderment. From the Geysers, from Old Faithful. So whoever is on there, is there anybody out there who's been to Yellowstone, who knows that area? Just let me know. You can say yes or no, and let me know if you remember it, because it's really a beautiful, beautiful area. So just to tell you a little bit about the Four Cousins, this is book one, and I really would suggest that if you're going to start reading, you do start reading them in order and read The Ghost of Canyon Camp first. It's the shortest of the books. It's the simplest, I think, for an 8 or 9-year-old to read. I found as I was writing these books and going through them that they were getting longer and maybe a little more adventures were being added in there. And I always try to appeal to all ages. So I appeal to the adventures and the fun of the younger children, but then I also include some historical facts about the area they're visiting for the older children. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. What I wanted to tell you about of the four children are their different personalities, and each one of them helps to solve the mysteries in the Four Cousins mystery series. So you have Kate, she's the oldest. And when this starts out, she's 12. And she is the organizer, she's the girl in charge. She watches over her sister Emma and her two younger cousins, Harrison and Parker. Harrison and Emma are only 2 months apart. Birthday's in December, his is in February, but they couldn't be more different. Emma is very excited about doing thrilling things. She'll go on a roller coaster. She'll do more adventurous things. Harrison is more the thinker. He is the one who he really is kind of Kate's sidekick. The two of them, they're serious, but they like to solve things. Emma has a sixth sense. Emma can sense things before they happen. She can sense danger. She can read people, read events. And so they come to depend on her throughout all of the adventures they have. Parker is the youngest. And when this first is written, Parker's about 6 or 7. And Parker is just filled with life and enthusiasm. And he'll do anything his older cousins do. He just wants to be a part of it all. And he is just filled with fun. So the four cousins are traveling to Yellowstone National Park from Florida, and they're traveling with their parents. They are going to be camping out. First of all, though, they're going to be staying at a place called Canyon Camp, and this is in Yellowstone. And my husband and I have visited Canyon Camp. We've gone horseback riding there. We love to go there. And so this story revolves a lot around places that we are very familiar with. And I like to write books and settings that I have visited and that I can tell about the adventures. If we're horseback riding, I'm going to go horseback riding because I want to know what it's all about so that whatever I tell them is authentic. So it starts out with the children flying to Montana, and it's Harrison and Parker's very first plane ride, so they're very excited. And one of the chapters is called Flying. And they get to Yellowstone. They have rented this wonderful log cabin in Canyon Camp, and it's really a beautiful log cabin, and it's in the woods, and it has an upstairs and downstairs, and both families are staying there. So you have this setting, and they, in the midst of being there and sitting on the porch and enjoying the fireflies and cooking out, grilling, and all of this, Parker sees that his superhero lunchbox comes up missing, and he's put it on the the back porch of the cabin, and he can't find it anywhere. So he's accusing his older brother Harrison, who denies it all. And so I was thinking that what shall I do when I'm writing this book? Because as I write it, it goes along as I write it, and I invent it. So I decided that the cousins were going to go further into Yellowstone. They were going to go near the Whispering Caves, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to camp in tents. And it is here that they first encounter what would be called the ghost of Canyon Camp. So I have two favorite chapters in this book. One of them is called Shadow in the Night, and the other is The Ghost of Canyon Camp. I debated about which one of those I was going to read you, because the Ghost of Canyon Camp kind of spills the beans. It tells you who the ghost is. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to read Shadow in the Night. So I want all of you, if you want to close your eyes or just sit back and imagine if you've gone camping yourselves and it's nighttime and you've sat around the fire and you've heard stories and you've cooked marshmallows and you're going to go then and sleep in the tent. And then there's all these night sounds. There's the owls in the night. You may hear some growling. There may be bobcats or bears or whatever. But I want you to imagine this. So I'm going to start reading for you Shadows in the Night. By the time the cousins returned to camp, evening was approaching, and the smell of barbecued chicken, hot homemade biscuits, and corn on the cob coming from the mess tent was calling to them. After a hearty supper, with much laughter and retelling of their exploits that afternoon, they all made their way to the campfire for toasted marshmallows, s'mores, songs, and storytelling. Kate, Emma, Harrison, and Parker were each given long branches whittled to sharp points at the end for their marshmallows. The cousins thought that they had never tasted anything so delicious as the golden brown toasted marshmallows that they were eating in abundance. They loved the stories of the Old West and sang Home on the Range right along with the Rangers. Kate thought that it was a magical sight, with the embers from the fire dancing high in the air like fireflies, or even fairies from Peter Pan, and she as Fawn was leading them. She thought that it had been a wonderful day filled with adventure, but she had noticed the fear in Parker's eyes when he had entered that whispering cave. Poor little guy, she whispered to herself. She knew that Parker had not gotten over his panic in Bat Cave last summer when he and Penny had gotten lost in the tunnels. Well, I'll just have to look out for him and make him feel safe, she told herself. At that moment, she wanted to hug Parker and tell him that there was nothing to be afraid of up here in Canyon Camp. And perhaps you can see this picture of the tent and the kids inside. Emma's thoughts were going in an entirely different direction as she watched the flickering flames. She shuddered at the feeling she had experienced up at the Whispering Caves. She hadn't told anyone yet. She knew that they would only tell her that she was imagining things again. Emma seemed to have a sixth sense. She felt things long before anyone else did, and at this moment she was convinced that someone had been watching them when they were in the caves. I know what I felt. Someone is up there. What should I do? Emma asked herself. For now, she decided to keep her feelings to herself and to enjoy the summer night. As they made their way back to the clearing in their tents, they saw the comforting glow from the lanterns inside each tent. Harrison and Parker's dad had already lighted Great-Grandpa Harry's lantern, and it was shining its cheerful warm glow around their sleeping quarters. Harrison thought how much smaller this space was inside. With 4 people, there was not the room to move around in as when it had just been he and his dad on their Cub Scout campout. Yet he liked having everyone together. He had missed his mom and Parker on the Cub Scout trip. He wanted everyone to have as much fun as he was having. Harrison had a very kind and loving heart, and he wanted his family, his aunt and uncle, and Kate and Emma, to share his joy. Soon the lanterns were extinguished, and both families were tucked warmly inside their sleeping bags. Luckily, both tents had waterproof canvas floors to protect them from the elements. A crackling fire burned in the center of the large clearing to warn animals away, and rangers would take turns all night patrolling the campsite, so they all felt quite safe. Emma woke with a start. What was that sound? She was scared. Heard it too, Kate whispered. Kate was wide awake, and she looked over at her parents on the other side of the tent. They were fast asleep. She didn't know whether to wake them or not, but she had heard branches breaking outside and the sound of footsteps. It's probably just the ranger walking around the camp. It could even be a bear, Kate quietly told her sister, although that was not a cheery thought either. I don't think so, Emma replied. The campfire is still burning and all the food is locked inside those metal containers, she reasoned. Where is the ranger? Kate wondered as she crawled to the opening flap of the tent and peered out. The ranger was curled up by the campfire in a sleeping bag. However, she did see another ranger standing guard on the far side of the camp. We must have been dreaming, she thought. Let's go back to sleep. The ranger is standing guard. I think we are safe, Kate reassured Emma. But the sound came from the woods behind our tent, and I heard someone out there. I know it, she insisted. Well, the ranger will see them. Please lie back down. Let's not wake Mom and Dad, Kate pleaded. So both girls quietly snuggled back into their sleeping bags, intent on sharing what they had heard with Harrison in the morning. It was a long time before they were able to fall asleep again. As Kate looked at her watch, time glowed 3 a.m. Meanwhile, Harrison was staring at the wall of his tent, the wall facing the thick underbrush and lodgepole pines. He also had heard a branch breaking, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought he had seen a shadow stealthily sneaking past their tent. It was an upright shadow, not a bear or other animal. He looked over at Penny, who had quickly raised her head and growled loudly. That had awakened Dad, who quickly told Penny to stop and lie back down. Dad, I heard something, Harrison urgently whispered, and I saw a shadow pass by our tent on the other side of the woods. He pointed in the direction of the opposite wall. Harrison's dad considered his son's plea and decided to take Great-Grandpa Harry's lantern and look outside. He put his finger to his lips, indicating for Harrison to be quiet as Parker and their mom continued to sleep quietly. He crept to the flap covering the opening of the tent and carefully unfastened it and silently exited the tent. After circling the tent and searching for any sign of an intruder, Harrison's dad spoke to the ranger standing guard on the far side of the clearing and relayed what his son had told him. The ranger assured him that he had seen nothing, that all was quiet and safe. The ranger offered to search, and he walked the perimeter of the camp with Harrison's dad. Both men saw and heard nothing, but they knew that the blackness of the forest could hide many things, or a person. For now, though, there was no sign of any disturbance. Even the horses were peaceful in the barn. It's just not like Harrison to imagine things. Parker, yes. Harrison, no, his dad said, thinking aloud, as he made his way back to the tent after thanking the ranger. He was uncomfortable with what Harrison had told him, and yet it could have been an animal. But what animal walks upright? It was a mystery that would soon be revealed. Harrison was waiting expectantly as his dad entered the tent. However, his dad simply shook his head and nodded for him to go back to sleep. But Dad, Harrison whispered. He wanted to know what his dad had found out. But his dad quietly indicated that they would talk in the morning as he shut off the lantern and plunged the tent into darkness, with the only light coming from the campfire in the middle of the clearing. Harrison stayed awake a long time, staring at the opposite wall of the tent, but no shadow passed by. Finally, he drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a tall, unseen figure that floated off into the woods with only the hooting of an owl for sound. And this is the first time that you encounter, or the children encounter, the ghost of Canyon Camp. They are going to be encountering him in a very unexpected way in the caves in the coming chapters. And I'd love to read more to you. I didn't want to share the Ghost of Canyon Camp chapter, but I might, because it is a wonderful chapter of their discovery, and I might in the days ahead. But it's going to be such a wonderful story for your children to unfold, and they'll be right there with the four cousins in the cave. They'll be right there when they encounter the grizzly bear and her cub, when they meet the ghost of Canyon Camp, who will end up saving them. And in turn, by the end of the book, they end up saving him. One of the things that I have always loved to do in my Four Cousins books is I actually will carry some of the main characters beyond the cousins over to another story. So in this story, the ghost is Jimmy. He goes by JW. You will see him again when this story is over. You'll see him in the third book, which is called The Secret of the Broken Arrow Mine, when the four cousins return again to Montana and into Wyoming. And he will be staying at what's called the Flying J Ranch. J is for Jesus. So he'll be staying there. It's run by a wonderful priest who has a ranch for 100 boys, and they're orphan boys. And so this is where the story is going to pick up with The Secret of the Broken Arrow Mine. But for tomorrow, I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how a book is created. Now, someone asked me before, is there a big difference between writing a children's book and writing a novel? Well, yes, there is. When you write a children's book, you have to make sure that the language is age appropriate. You have to make sure that there are pictures in here. Here's the grizzly bear. You have to make sure that there are pictures throughout here. So a lot of these pictures come from photographs that I have taken when I have been on my travels. And so also it's a lot of adventure and a lot of action in the children's books. And I'll talk a little bit more to you tomorrow about the difference between the children's books and the novel and how these books again are created. So I hope that you have really enjoyed our adventure today as we went into Yellowstone and the Ghost of Canyon Camp. And I really appreciate the comments that you've given me. And I also want to see you hopefully again tomorrow and in the days ahead. Some of you I know have already said to me, hey, I've seen you before and I'm here again. And I hope to see you again tomorrow. So I wish you all happy reading. And again, if you would like to buy any of these books, Evermore, the adult novel, the romance mystery about my family, or the Four Cousins Mystery series, these can be purchased through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but hopefully you'll go to my website, fourcousinsmysteries.com, and purchase them, and I will mail them free of charge, and they will be signed by me and the four cousins. So God bless you all, and I hope to see you again in the days ahead. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.